No shipping, no shopping. And I think that talks directly at how important this industry is, and it shouldn't be taken for granted. It is a small community, it's an invisible community, and yet it moves 80-90% of world trade.
Why is it the Philippines has become and is still the number one labor market in terms of numbers?
I think historically that goes back to education and exposure. Those countries and ship owner associations that broke the glass ceiling early now have full Filipino crew, top to bottom. The reality, it's a job that's 24/7. It is a job that is continuously in motion. The ship has to keep moving. If you look at our company motto, which is moving the world in more ways than one, I think that's the pitch. If you do join this industry, you will be able to do important things that make the world move.
I'm here with Gerardo Borromeo, the CEO of PTC. But how did this start for you? You know, where did PTC begin?
Oh, PTC began a long time ago in 1979 when Ambassador Salinas was looking at how can you address a growing issue in the maritime field where owners were hit with rising costs, a very challenging labor market, and needing to bring certainty into their operating costs. And so they said to themselves, are there other places in this world where one can find seafarers who can be trained and who can evolve and take the place of seafarers who had been, until that time, really seafarers of the flag of origin of the countries? Norway is one prime example. And because of the macroeconomics of the world at that time, it compelled them to look for other countries. And it so happened that there had been some initial efforts to bring Filipinos on board. And in 1979, with very, very good discussions with the Uglan family from Grimstad, the decision was made to consider how to bring Filipinos on board Norwegian ships. Essentially, the idea was to reflag them to the Philippines, but have a technical agreement so that the Norwegians still could provide the technical management of the ships, but to be able to bring Filipinos onto bigger responsibilities. And it worked. But it took Norwegian owners, in this particular case, the Uglan family, to realize that commercially it made sense to look for alternative nationalities who could bring on board the skill sets, the attitude, and the desire to become a maritime professional, but that technically they needed to provide training to bring everybody up to world standards. And that was a formula that worked. And from 1979 onwards, PTC grew from an initial 72 crew that were dispatched on the very first ships to today we have over 44,000 crew on board the world's fleet at any one time.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, you have to thank the vision of Ambassador Salinas and the hardworking efforts of all of the people that through the years were involved in this effort. But what we came to realize is that doing so was not just a transaction. To be able to get the best of people, one needed to find where the meaning and purpose was.
Yeah.
And our realization is that seafarers are the technical description of people who work on board a ship. But the reality is, you don't want to just be a seafarer. You want to be a maritime professional. You want to be a global maritime professional. And it's important that we characterize and help define that role for people, because the industry itself is a very invisible industry, and yet it moves 80-90% of world trade. And while there is all of this automation that is coming forward, it'll be a while before you get a completely unmanned vessel.
You think that will come eventually, completely unmanned?
It's being tried, and there's no reason why we shouldn't challenge technology.
Even on the big deep sea vessels?
There's no reason why you can't challenge the technology. And it's about people, process, and technology. But there will always be a role for people. And so understanding what that role should be should force us to think many years in advance, how do we see the evolution of a maritime professional? Because the ships need to be taken care of. And do you envision that robots will take care of everything, including painting and replacing this part or that part, or making some very immediate decisions? So I think in the foreseeable future, not yet, there will be more and more automation. And for that, of course, the skill level of what we call the future seafarers, the global maritime professionals, has to change. But going back to your first question, it started because there was a need. And that need today has continued to be reinforced by the fact that from a macroeconomic standpoint, the Philippines is one of the few countries where our per capita income has not grown as fast as other countries. And so therefore, the ability to earn very good money outside, whether it is a land-based job or in this case, a maritime job, is significantly more by 5, 6, 7, even 10 times what you could earn here. And so that delta is what will drive interest in seafaring. So if that's the case, and if we project forward to see that there will be a need for people, then the question we should ask ourselves is how do we best prepare for that? What kind of person, what kind of mentality, what kind of skill sets do we need to have? And it's for the Philippine government to realize that there is this opportunity, establish a target for themselves, and work with the private sector to make sure that the pipeline of people who can be developed will be there. It is an opportunity for the Philippines. We're considered a seafaring capital of the Philippines, of the world, and are able to produce a seafarer of choice. That's today. That has been there for a number of years. Will it be there 5, 10, 15 years from now? That's up to us to make sure that we can make that happen.
And I really want to dig deep into that because I've spoke to a lot of people around the Philippines. You know, why is this the number one labor market? And I think you'll be able to give us some really interesting insight into that. But we just explored the beginning and the future of PTC. But what about the beginning of yourself, Dito? Where did this? Are you from a maritime background yourself? Where did your career begin?
It happened over a cup of coffee, literally in that room over
Oh yeah,
there. Yes, we were here talking about healthcare professionals. And we were wondering whether you needed healthcare professionals on board a cargo ship. With 22 people, that's not the case. On cruise ships, yes.
Yeah.
And at that time, Ambassador Salinas was thinking, look, we are 25 years into our business. I need to look at the next 25 years. What are we going to do? So we started to talk of what kind of a strategy would be needed to evolve. So I came in and provided some advice, actually some ideas and thoughts, and one thing led to another, and I got involved in the business, and so here I am today.
But you don't come from a maritime background?
No, the closest I would say that I came to that was my father's family was involved in LPG distribution. Okay. And had brought in several pressurized tankers. This was in the 70s before the business got nationalized. So I would say not directly involved, but realizing that the shipping aspect of certain industries was a key component. Because without ships in an archipelagic country, you're not able to connect the dots, so to speak. And interestingly enough, I found out later that Andreas Nordseth, who recently retired as Director General of the Danish Maritime Authority, his father was a captain on one of those tankers that he brought to the Philippines for my father. And so we established a connection later on. And it was interesting because his father stayed here for 6 months. And the idea was that he trained Filipinos to actually learn how to operate what at the time was a more sophisticated vessel. So even the elements of that were sort of ingrained in my mind.
And people say that maritime, albeit a $1 trillion industry, it's actually quite a small community. You know, people cross over all the time without even knowing.
Yes, it is. It is a small community. It's an invisible community. And yet, as some people have said, I think the Danes have said this, no shipping, no shopping. Yeah. And I think that talks directly at how important this industry is. And it shouldn't be taken for granted. And this is why if we want to attract the next generation of people into the business, then we've got to think, how do you want to frame their job? And imagine this, what is the entry-level position called? An ordinary seaman. Yeah. You go and face the next generation of emerging youth today and say, we'd like you to be an ordinary seaman. Yeah. Can I attract you? As opposed to, say, Microsoft or Google wanting software engineers or data analysts, which is a much more exciting sounding job. The reality is that when you work on a ship, it's not just a job. You have to ensure that the ship will go from A to B in the time needed because you are ensuring that trade happens. So we provide crew to certain orange juice carriers that go from Brazil to Florida to New Jersey to the Netherlands. And I've told my team that, we shouldn't tell them that they're just working on a tanker ship. We should tell them that if they don't do their job right, we are potentially compromising the availability of orange juice on the breakfast table. When you start to narrate the work that way, it takes on new meaning and purpose. So even if you're away for a long time, you realize that what you're carrying is a key component to a whole value chain. And all of a sudden then, I hope that if we are able to describe the work that way, that people will say, yeah, actually, we should be thinking this way, because then we can attract the kinds of minds, even the minds that are more technically oriented, to work on a ship which will probably become more sophisticated in terms of its technology.
Yeah, very well said. I think one of the big pressing questions that I've constantly always looked around when it comes to maritime is why the Philippines? Why is it the Philippines has become and is still, some people say China, but is still the number one labor market in terms of numbers? Is it something to do with the culture? Is it because you said this is the archipelago people? Is it because Filipino seafarers are the most expeditious? Why do you think it is?
I think it's a number of factors. And I go back to the time in the 70s when Norwegian owners realized that there was an opportunity. You needed somebody who was willing to take the risk that another type of individual could actually work on board the ship. And when you think about it, any industry, it's a formula. If you educate and train, you can develop the skill sets. You just need to expose people and put them in the right environment, working with the right set of processes, tools, and technology, and they will make things happen. Now, with that in mind, and you look at the makeup of a Filipino who is very loyal, all they want is an opportunity, and if you recognize what they will give, and you pat them on the back every so often, they are committed for life. And the macroeconomic formulas here, as I shared with you earlier, is a significant increase. And even before we look at the maritime in the Philippines, because we are an archipelagic country, and you have, in this case, Manila, which had been evolving over time as the center of gravity, most people from the provinces actually would leave their families to go to the main capital to work. For what reason? To send money home.
Yeah.
So that movement of people was already built into the way we lived our lives. So to take another step in another country or on a moving platform was not that difficult, because what I think drives Filipinos are really a care and love for their family and the willingness to sacrifice, because they recognize that only through sacrifice and hard work can you bring a benefit to individuals who may not have had the best in life. And on the one hand, you might say, well, that is a challenge that this country has faced, because we have not evolved the way we should have over the years for many reasons, economic policies, political issues, global issues. We are where we are, but because of where we are able to provide people. And that's why at PTC we say we provide people who move the world in more ways than one. And in fact, when you think about a person working on a ship, the ability that they have to move from point A to point B, if you're talking about raw material that can run a power plant, which generates the necessary energy to create steel, to create wood, to create cement, which then gets moved to create intermediate products, and then the final product, which needs to get shipped. The contribution of the Philippines, if you think about it, we're about 25% of the workforce on the international fleet. The attributable economic value of their work is 25% of the total value of trade that goes on ships. And in my estimate, that's about $20 trillion that were moved in value on ships in 2023. And you take 25% of that, that's $5 trillion of attributable economic value for Filipinos. And compare that with our total economy as a country, which at that time was only 460 billion, if my figures are correct. That's 12 times. And how many Filipinos were involved? 600,000 full-time equivalent positions at any one time against a population of 115 million people. So you can see that actually this industry moves the world, and Filipinos are contributing a significant number to that effort. So we need to be proud of that. The government recognizes remittances coming into the country. That's in their balance sheet.
Yeah, of course.
They don't recognize and can't recognize attributable economic value. But if we start the narration and the narrative and the story that way, I'm hoping we can convince other people that this is an important job. It is a noble job. It is a job that moves the world. And then you begin to provide people the meaning and purpose of why they should be doing this. Because otherwise, even if it's well-paying, would you like to be away for 6 months or 9 months at a time? Which is also why, when you look at the way the economics have moved over the years, you've gone from well-developed countries where earning on land was even better than earning at sea. So why go to sea? And that moved from, say, Northern Europe to Northern Asia, Japan and Korea. But as their economies evolved, you recognize that earning on land was better than earning at sea. And that moved to countries like the Philippines and India, Indonesia. So the economics, the macroeconomics, will oftentimes dictate the way labor moves. And in this case, when we project our macroeconomic figures, our economists tell us that if today we're at $4,000 per capita per year, in 10 years, we're only going to be $10,000 per capita per year. If that is correct, today an individual, on the average, is earning between $15,000 and $20,000 per year. That's 4 to 5 times more than the average per capita here.
Yeah.
But if you're an officer and we want to produce more officers, you could be earning $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 a year, which is a significant jump to what they would otherwise be earning. And you can compare an officer, for example, who comes from a humble background. They did not necessarily go to any of our top-rated schools, what we call the Ateneo, La Salle, UP, or any of the universities in Manila, or in some of the key cities. And yet, if we look at a graduate of any of these top schools and measure what their output is 10, 15 years from when they graduate, and you look at the output of an officer on a ship 10, 15 years after, they're earning as much, if not more, grossed up, because the Philippines doesn't charge a tax. And when you consider their responsibility in terms of the attributable economic value, it's a significant step higher than what land-based jobs would earn. We need to tell that story, because if we can tell that story, then you are going to be looking to develop global maritime professionals, and not just a seafarer, not just an ordinary seaman. And this is true not only for the Philippines. We need, as an industry, to be able to tell that story, because everyone always says there's a shortage. Don't have enough of this. We don't have enough of that. Well, if we peel that onion enough, is there really a shortage?
No.
Because the ships continue to operate. So something else is giving way.
Yeah.
But there may be a shortage of the right person at the right time. And that is what we need to do to look at developing people. The Philippines, some people will say the Philippines has too many schools, too many maritime academies. I say otherwise. I say we need to take that platform, which is what has allowed us to provide ratings and officers, and work with them to be able to ensure that we can keep that pipeline going. And we actually have an interesting filter, because at Marina, they only issue anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 licenses every year. So there is an actual filter that prevents people who haven't learned to go forward. And in my mind, if you earn a degree or finish the academic requirements, because you see, to get a degree, you have to have the 3 years academic program and the 1 year at sea. But let's say you finish all of your academic programs and decide you don't want to get to sea. Somehow we should find a way to give them the degree that they need, whether it's a degree in marine transportation or a degree in marine engineering. Because how many people do you know who took music, history, language, or math or science, are actually or even the medical field or legal field, how many decide not to practice in that particular field? But they have a degree, and they can use that degree in many other ways. So we actually have a platform that is more significant than other countries. So if I were to look at the Philippines, I would tell the story that we have a significant platform, and it's for you to polish the diamond in the rough. You polish and cut, you polish and cut, you polish and cut, and you create the partnerships with the local institutions to be able to provide the maritime professional of the future. And if countries are saying, well, we would like more from the Philippines, I would say provide the berths. Allocate enough berths And the Philippines will follow through. And that is an industry academic linkage. It is a private-public partnership. It could be, for example, where the Europeans come together and say, look, let's make available so many berths, which actually the Norwegian Shipowners Association is doing. They have their own challenges, but they are able to do that. That's why they have their own program. You multiply this program and you will be able to find the people that are needed. I mean, and for me, education is really the main difference. And why is that? Because if you think of somebody who's 5 years old today, and if they go through the entire educational program, it'll take them 16 years to graduate from school. Add 16 years to the year 2026, and that brings us to the year 2042. What will life be like in 2042? What kind of people are we going to need then? So our educational trajectory has to continue to be refined, and this is where industry academic linkages are very important. And that is why what PTC has done over the last 17, 18 years is create that industry academic linkage. We have a relationship with the Mapua Institute of Technology, the country's leading engineering university, and we created the Mapua PTC College of Maritime Education and Training, which is the only school in the Philippines and the first in Asia to get a full accreditation from a European country. The Belgian Maritime Inspectorate basically treats the Mapua PTC College of Maritime Education and Training as a Belgian school. So it is able and capable of issuing a certificate of competency as well as a certificate of proficiency for the various licenses and certifications needed. That's the kind of partnership where a country that is a resource base is brought into a global playing field. And that's probably what we need more of if we are going to continue to be that seafaring capital of the world.
Yeah, I totally agree. More investment into the education and using the platform you have here, the established, I think there's about 90 maritime schools in the whole of the Philippines.
80 some, yes.
Okay, yeah. So there's so much opportunity there. I want to pick into something you said earlier on about how you want PTC to be producing more officers. I spent some time in Batumi, Georgia, and I was speaking to a captain out there, Georgian guy, and he said something to me. I told him about how my maritime career started in the Philippines in 2020. I came out here, I was working for a startup and lived here for 2 years. And I have a really deep connection to the Filipino people, especially the Filipino seafarers. He said something to me which I thought was incredibly profound, and I want to get your take on this. He said to me, Filipinos make great ratings, but they don't make great officers. What do you think of that?
I think historically that goes back to education and exposure. For many years, as ratings, you did all the grunt work. And for many years, if you look at the 70s and early 80s, there was always a glass ceiling in terms of how high the Filipino could go. Those countries and shipping owner associations that broke the glass ceiling early now have full Filipino crew, top to bottom. And it's actually up to the company whether they would like to see one nationality on their ships or they'd like to see mixed nationalities. And it is also true that over the many, many years, that Filipinos felt that, well, they were earning enough as ratings compared to what they would otherwise earn locally. Economists have this idea, they call it the backward bending supply curve of labor, that you earn up to a certain point, beyond that you don't want to do any more work.
Yeah.
So why take on more responsibility when issues like criminalization and leadership and management required you to do much more? And perhaps that was a stumbling block. But I see in the younger generation of cadets this eagerness to fulfill that dream of being an officer. And the whole idea is to think of this business as not just a crewing business, but as a business that it requires human capital development. So in human capital development, you've got to get into the mindset of the person and help them realize the full potential of what can be. So if you want to call somebody a seafarer and you're going to be an ordinary seaman, I mean, how far can one's imagination go?
Yeah.
But if you say, I'm going to transform you from being a seafarer into a global maritime professional, I'll teach you not only the technical skills, but I'll teach you how to be a good captain, to have the leadership and management capability to make the decisions. And by the way, if you do this, this is what you could potentially earn. There's financial benefits and gains are a great motivator. So if you have the right educational background and you have that formation early on, I can't see why the sky wouldn't be the limit. But for the most part, most companies who have tried to create industry academic linkages have started and stopped at the university level. What PTC has done is we've taken a couple of steps backwards. When the Philippines went from the K to 10 program of education to K to 12, we worked with several high schools that created a senior high school track, and offered a maritime track for them. And the reason for that was the government realized that if it was only K to 10, students were graduating at the age of 16, too young to get a job. And for the most part, here in the Philippines, most companies require a college degree to be able to get a job. So you after 16, you would have another 4 years. You're still much younger than everyone else. And you didn't get the full benefit of all of the education. So they shifted to K to 12, which is good. There is a need to make sure that the K to 10 program seamlessly connects with the 11th and 12th grade so that it can move on to college. That will continue to evolve. And then you can begin to see that people at the age of 18 graduating from senior high school may have an opportunity, perhaps not quite ready in the initial stages to go internationally, but certainly to work domestically as a stepping stone, and then create the domestic fleet as a platform for developing people that can go abroad. We then realized that if we want to have a pipeline of talent, let's not wait for people who are in college, and don't even just look at people in high school. Start them earlier in elementary school. So we had a program called My Ship, My World, and this was a program offered to fourth to sixth graders for about 6 weeks in a year. A classroom was given a map of the world, and we allowed them to track one of the ships where we provide crew.
Oh, wow.
So every week they were communicating, emailing a captain, and the captain would email back, and so they could track where in the world the ship was. So you learned geography, what the ship was carrying, some economics, some mathematics in terms of time of travel, so on and so forth. So the teacher all of a sudden could provide an integrated way of teaching what would otherwise be very boring subjects in the elementary school. And the interesting feedback we got were a couple of things. Teachers were saying, we've got the attention of the kids. Even those that weren't paying attention before are now paying attention, which is really great because there was a story to tell. From the perspective of the students, they began to say, now I understand why my uncle, my brother, my cousin, my father, my mother is gone for so long. They're involved in this industry. So having a My Ship, My World program was like us sprinkling pixie dust of the industry to young kids so that as they grew older, they realized there might be an opportunity here. So what are we trying to do? We're creating a pipeline of future potential people who can then be directed to a senior high school with a maritime track, who could then be directed to a maritime academy. That's how you build a pipeline of talent. Now, on the younger side, between elementary school and high school, we created a program called the Seafarers program, which was like a Boy Scout or Cub Scout program or a Girl Scout program. And instead of forming a troop, you would form a ship. And you would ask the kids to play act the roles that are necessary on a ship. Again, another way of exposing people to an industry that is otherwise invisible. And you not only taught them and exposed them to the marine industry, the maritime industry, but you also taught them the value of conservation, of sustainability, the marine ecosystem, which 80% of our total area in this country is water. And it's interesting because I think there are a significant number of people who would like to go to sea who don't know how to swim in the first instance. And you can't go to sea without learning to swim. So it's part and parcel of our country and the potential that we have. And since we're already there, why not continue to develop this? So when I characterize the industry, it shouldn't be transactional. It's not about just putting a person on a ship. So there's human capital development, which is made up of talent acquisition, talent development, and talent deployment. But you also have to learn inventory management. And you manage two inventories, the positions on board a ship that need to be filled and the number of people that can fill them. Managing the two is called supply chain management. And so if you understand human capital development, and you overlay this with an idea of how do you manage inventory and the logistics of the movement of people, then it begins to shape the complexity of this business, which is not just trying to put a person to a job, but recognizing all of the different things that need to come into play in order to ensure that the ship operates safely, securely, and efficiently.
You know, that's so interesting because in my country, in the UK is an island country as well, I speak to maritime colleagues and we regularly discuss, you know, how difficult it is to get some of these kids, you know, to learn about maritime. And we have some of the best maritime schools in the world. We have Warsash, for example, and that's just down the road from my house. And a lot of these people that you're volunteering, they go to schools, maybe on a careers day, they set up a desk and they hand out flyers. But these kind of programs that you're talking about is such an interesting idea because a lot of kids, they don't like you say, this is an invisible industry. They don't even know it exists. And actually, quite often what we have in the UK is that young people are actually looking for something to spark an interest.
Sure.
They live in this sort of like a shoulder shrug, I don't know what I want to do with my life for such a long time. A little thing like that can really change their outlook. Next generation, you mentioned, and this is something that I think is really, really interesting because you're right, I've never liked the title ordinary seaman. And when you speak to an ordinary seaman, they always say OS because they don't want to say ordinary seaman. But you know, I'm in Manila right now. You walk around, there's cafes. Young people are working on their laptops everywhere now. And it's not just about, you know, getting a job with Microsoft or something. Nowadays, someone can make $1,000, $1,500 a month making websites and doing, you know, social media and stuff as a freelancer. And the Philippines is a known country now for getting freelance work. How does maritime compete against that? You've touched a little bit more. I know you might talk about we need to make maritime professionals, but as an industry as a whole, how do we really say to young people, you know, look at us. This means more.
Well, it's storytelling, and it's the same way that the other industries have shown what they can do for the world, and we have to do our part to be able to explain what does it mean to move the world, and why is that meaningful for an individual. It's not for everyone, and it's not like we're talking about millions and millions of jobs. We're talking about, at this point, 2 million people.
Yeah.
And I don't foresee that 2 million is going to increase exponentially.
Okay.
Because what will happen is you'll get bigger ships, you'll have the feeder ships, but they will grow at a steady state relative to the growth of the global economy and the world population. We're at 8 billion. We should be 9 billion, maybe by 2050. So that there is going to be growth in that. And I just feel that it's the way we try to tell our story. And I know that at the International Chamber of Shipping, they themselves have tried to be able to show a side of the industry that makes sense. In my case, in the case of the Philippines, I've suggested we should create 50 million conversations about shipping. And I picked that figure up. You can pick any figure. But the more people talk about the industry and talk about the industry to show the meaning and purpose of what this industry can do and the financial rewards in a country that continues to grow its population. We're growing at the rate of 1.4, 1.5 million people. We're growing, but at a slower rate.
Okay.
But we're still growing.
Yeah.
And the estimates are we'll come close to 150 million people by the year 2050. So there will be a considerable number of people in this country. Our economy will grow. It's projected to be perhaps the 16th largest by 2050 if all comes together. And so therefore, we have a chance to continue to contribute to that. And the way we contribute to that is through jobs overseas and the money that is sent back. And so it's a story that we have to tell. And yeah, we'll be challenged by other industries. And it's for us to be able to carve out this niche. This is why we have felt that it shouldn't just be a college narrative.
Yeah.
It should be a high school narrative. It should be an elementary school narrative. It should be a community narrative, building on the fact that the maritime community does contribute significantly to many of these outlying areas. And so therefore, we have to be able to tell an interesting story to attract them.
And do you think the multinationals should play a role as well? Because when I go to these conferences and you look at the sponsors, it's always the same maritime companies. But what about IKEA and Nike and Adidas and stuff. Do you think that perhaps those multinationals should be playing a role in maritime, and because ultimately, from a logistics perspective, it's imperative.
Some of them have already decided to take matters into their own hands by having their own vessels or chartering vessels to make sure that their supply chains go.
Like who?
Well, you've heard of companies like Amazon and some of the bigger supply chain companies looking to see how they can control the movement of goods. But in terms of involvement, it's not necessarily IKEA's core, but there could be corresponding communication programs.
Yeah, I think so.
Which can evolve and develop and tell the story of why shipping moves the world and why, if there is no shipping, there is no shopping. Creatively, it's an opportunity. How to put those two together, those are conversations that need to take place.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that I wanted to dig into is, at PTC, are you managing other nationality seafarers as well? So do you have Indians and so on and so forth, or is this just Filipinos?
Primarily Filipinos. We want to give the benefit to an opportunity to Filipinos, but we recognize that Filipinos may not all be available and ready and capable at the time that are needed. So we have started to work with other nationalities on different ships, and we will continue to evolve that, because my vision for PTC is that while we are based in the Philippines, where our market is really the global market, so we should be able to operate in any kind of market with partnerships that make sense. So we will always look at those opportunities, because for me, the most important thing is that the ship continues to operate.
Yeah.
I'd like to be able to provide as many Filipinos as there are an opportunity. And there will always be a need for people on the ship. So it's a matter of how do you balance demand and supply.
What's your prediction for the future when it comes to those other labor markets? I hear people talking about Indonesia's growing. They're building infrastructure there in terms of maritime schools. People are also talking about Africa as well. That's a hot topic as well. What's your prediction for the future? I know obviously you have the Philippines as your number one interest, but do you think we'll see other labor markets grow in the future?
I think you look at it from two perspectives. At least the way I see it is that you look at the macroeconomics of that country and how is their per capita income on land growing, and at what rate versus what the person could otherwise earn if they went on sea. Depending on what that story is, will probably tell you in which direction the supply will go. In terms of putting up schools, as I said, the fact that we have 80 such maritime
it's pretty
academies,
established.
It's an established platform. It's for us to make the most out of it if we know how to put the pieces together and work out the linkages with ship owners, ship managers, and crew managers. Other countries are just beginning to do that, and no reason why they shouldn't. But I think they will be what their challenge will be their macroeconomics, language, and the basic DNA of the individual. And I think those are some of the advantages that Filipinos still have. But we can't take we can't take for granted those advantages. We have to constantly, what I call, polish the diamond. It's a diamond in the rough, and our ability to polish and cut the diamond is what will make a difference in the period ahead.
And speaking about polishing that diamond, I can't remember if it was 24 or 25. It sort of exploded. All my friends in the Philippines were talking about the Magna Carta. This was a huge deal, right? Now, I'm from the UK. I still don't quite understand exactly the significance of what this means for Filipino seafarers, but could you explain it in a layman's terms?
Well, I think the impetus for the Magna Carta was to provide an enabling law for the Maritime Labor Convention.
Okay.
Because the Maritime Labor Convention is considered the Magna Carta for seafarers. But as an international convention, you need local enabling laws so that from each country they can implement the corresponding provisions. But in addition to that, I guess the authors of the law felt like, in addition to adopting the Maritime Labor Convention, they also wanted to talk about education, because education was a hot topic because of the EMSA issue, the EMSA file issue, which is being resolved in another matter through Project Scope, which is a partnership between the European Union through DG Move, actually European Commission through DG Move, and the Philippine government. And that's going very, very well. And Andreas Nordseth, who retired as the Director General of the Danish Maritime Authority, is the project lead for this effort. And because of his knowledge, his skills, his experience, where he knows what Europe wants, he was actually formerly chairman of EMSA. He is here in the Philippines, living in the Philippines, and will be in the Philippines for the next 5 to 7 years to make sure that this whole effort, that he can work closely with Marina to make sure that we will find the right way forward on that. So the EMSA issue in education, I think what the bill or what the Magna Carta wanted was to make sure that this was elevated and so that we could deliver what is necessary. And then the other aspect of the Magna Carta was this whole concept of wanting to make sure that seafarers were always treated properly. And when it came to issues such as medical issues or contractual issues, that they would be properly taken care of.
Yeah.
Now, we have the standard employment contract of the POEA, but the concern of many other parties, and I would say that even for seafarers, was this whole idea of ambulance chasing, where when
this is a big problem in the Philippines.
It's not unique to the Philippines. There are many countries where you have very aggressive lawyers always looking for liability compensation.
But I remember hanging out. There's a specific part of Rizal Park, the Seafarers Corner. Mm-hmm. You know this place?
Yes.
And they're renowned for having these guys sort of like lurching around and waiting.
So that's there. And if you really want to protect the seafarer, then you want to make sure that if the seafarer deserves some kind of compensation, that they get it 100%. Yeah. And that no other system will prevent that from happening. And so the Magna Carta's effort was to make sure that there could be some kind of mechanism that would balance the interests of the seafarers with the interests of the employers. And if you look at it from the employer standpoint, the biggest challenge was, I think at the time, and I don't know what the number is now, but it was well over $50 million of compensation given to seafarers, which was ultimately reversed by the Supreme Court.
Wow.
And there's no way to get that money back anymore. So it suggested that not everything was properly adjudicated in providing compensation. And if you look at all of these cases, and most of them are medical related cases, there is a tariff or a schedule of what you can get depending on the severity of the injury. In, I would say, just about all cases, I think it's all cases that are filed, it's always total disability that's being requested. It's a shot of the moon. We had a case where an appendectomy resulted in a total disability, but that medically doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Or a partial loss of a finger becomes a total disability. My position is if a person is completely injured, they should receive that. I mean, that's why if you look at the entire picture, they're there to serve a purpose, to ensure that global trade happens. So if there's something that prevents them from participating in that, they should be compensated for it. But I'd like to be able to see a way for somebody to still get back on, because if they are on that career track, why not continue until they're not until they're done? But if you're going to abuse the system, that's not fair for the other side. So there must always be a balance in terms of all of these things. And the Magna Carta's effort was to balance that. Now, the seafarers, or people siding with the seafarers, might say, well, it's not fair that a seafarer has to put up a bond to be able to get the money. But that mechanism was put in place only to make sure that both parties are fair, that if you really want the money because you're deserving of that money, then just make sure that it can't be contested or turned over or overturned at some point in time. Because if it is, then the bond will answer for that. So it's just asking people to be fair and think it through. And most owners are good owners, and they will take care of their crew. Because if you've built a relationship with the crew, this is why retention is important. It's not about putting somebody on a ship and then the next cycle it's somebody else. You'd like to get good people to keep coming back to their ships, because it's familiarity with systems, with people, with procedures, with the equipment that makes for a safe ship. So if you think of things in balance, the Magna Carta was supposed to create an environment for that balance, because prior to the Magna Carta, it was not a balanced system. And the anecdotal evidence is the amount of money that has been put out that cannot be recovered after being overturned. And yet there will be many sides to that argument, and that's fine. I mean, people are entitled to their own opinions, but at the end of the day, is it fair?
Yeah.
Is it the truth? Is it going to bring harmony to the parties that are participating in this? And we have to think about tomorrow and the next day and the next month and the next year. This is not a one event benefit, and that's it.
You talked about building a safe ship. That just brought something else to my mind. Chief McCoy was on a panel with me at Crew Connect Global, and he clipped something from our discussion, and it got over 1 million views on Facebook. Thousands of Filipino seafarers were commenting, and it was a piece of which Chief McCoy was talking about fatigue. This is a huge topic on board. I know last year there was a lot around bullying and harassment. Obviously, the STCW new training came into play on January the 1st. I did a really big campaign at the IMO for Day of the Seafarer around that, My Harassment-Free Ship. But the fatigue side of things, this is a really difficult one, because I actually can't figure out how to fix this, because this is a job where quite naturally, you know, you are working unnormal working hours, you know,
Yes.
and I don't see how that can ever change. What's your opinion when it comes to fatigue of seafarers, and is there a way of being able to fix this?
Inevitably, one will hit fatigue. So it's a matter of how you handle the rostering and the scheduling of work. And it's for the leadership of the ship to say, all right, you take a break here and manage that. But the reality, it's a job that's 24/7. And so therefore, manage within that, because the ship has to keep moving. And of course, the easiest thing would be to add many more people on the ship, if that is at all possible. But the ships aren't designed for that, and they're not made for that. And in fact, systems and procedures now are being refined with the idea that you want to remove the administrative burden. So some of that is already being offloaded to shoreside. So I think it's a management approach, and I think it also is reflective of how a leader will try to arrange his workforce and work team, because it's about the mission. It's about a safe ship operating and getting to its destination. And it goes back to, how do we define this work? And I think this work is about global trade. It's about making sure things go from A to B. And it's not easy. It's not meant for everyone. And if we take the proposition that it is a job that does create a lot of challenges, it's a going in proposition. So let's manage within that, rather than say it's not going to work. Now, there are people who will abuse that. And so if that is being abused, then let's peel the onion back. Why is it being abused? What is it that we're missing in the discussion? But otherwise, it is a job that is continuously in motion. And so therefore, we need to work within the parameters of continuous motion to make sure that we can get the mission done.
Yeah, and that leads to the next part, which is, you know, let's say, for example, seafarers finish their shift, they go back to their cabin, and now, you know, they have 6 hours or so to sleep, but they now decide they're going to start doom scrolling on TikTok and stuff, and they're staying awake for 2-3 hours. And the shipping company then argues, well, if this is the case, why are we paying for connectivity on? You know, let's only have specific times where connectivity is working. And then the seafarer will go, oh, but when I'm at home, I have unlimited connectivity. It's my human right. So it's a really difficult area to manage.
It is. I think, and that's why I say, let's go back to what is the work environment? What is the objective of the job? And recognize that if the objective of the job requires certain ways of carrying out the work when you're working and when you're resting, that has to be factored in. We can't say, well, when I'm at home, because that's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
You have to define things according to their location, and also the benefit of or the realization of what kind of job and industry. I mean, it's like you're in an operating room. So the people who have been called to take on that task have to know that they're going in there because it's a life or death situation, and it could be a very complicated surgery. You're not going to give up on the patient. You're not going to say, I'm fatigued and therefore I can't do this. And so therefore, when you are resting, you should be resting. There is a responsibility for the individual to perform their task and to rest when is necessary, because you can't burn both ends of the candle. So yeah, I think that there is always going to be fatigue, as there is fatigue in any kind of job. It's how we manage it by understanding all of the different elements that go into it on all sides of the equation. And this is where continuous dialogue should be encouraged. And it's natural that one side will see it one way, the other side sees it another way. So we have to constantly bridge the gap. And by talking about it, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we know the ship has to sail. We know that products have to move. So who wants to be involved? And if the people think that this is not a job for them, then don't be involved so that you don't get into that mess. So that's why I say it's not a job for everyone. And for us, what we need to do in the country, in the Philippines, is open up the funnel to encourage as many people to consider. Because the more people that can be considered, I guess the better the choice will be. But that also has its downside, because if you produce too many and they're not going to get the job, then it has the reverse.
Yeah.
It'll also kill enthusiasm. So it's always a fine-tuning effort. And what it means is that these interesting situations will always be there. We will never remove the challenges or problems. It's how we approach the issues to manage the gaps in between. And I think that's what will distinguish a good company from a not so good company.
Yeah, I totally agree. I respect your time. So two last questions. There's a classic thing that always happens at London Shipper Week, which is where the executives will be on stage and they'll be talking about seafarers, and they'll go, who in here would recommend a career at sea for their children?
Yeah.
And you look to see how many people raise their hands. And quite frankly, it's almost zero. My question to you is, if you were speaking to a young 14, 15-year-old female, male, Filipino, who was kind of figuring out what they want to do with their life, what is the pitch for having a career at sea? You know, I speak to Filipinos, and once you dig past the salary part, a large part of it is about seeing the world. You know, that's a really, repetitive thing I've heard. But what do you think the pitch is?
If you look at our company motto, which is moving the world in more ways than one, I think that's the pitch, is that it's not for everyone, but if you do join this industry, you will be able to do important things that make the world move. And that's why I say that I don't think we should pitch the job as that of being an ordinary seaman or a captain or an engineer, but it's a job that is involved in global trade. And we need to be able to define and explain the industry and the work as being an important element in global trade. And from the Philippine perspective, we actually have a historical connection to that. The galleon trade, which went from 1565 to 1815, which is the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade, saw that the Philippines in the 1500s, and it wasn't really called the Philippines yet, it was beginning to be called Las Islas Filipinas, was where the Spanish constructed a good number of their galleons using Philippine hardwood, using Philippine craftsmen to build galleons, which became the floating trade vessels. And after building the galleons, the Filipinos were conscripted as the crew. So back in the 1500s, we were building ships for global trade. We were crewing ships for global trade. 500 years forward, and we are building ships for global trade, and we are crewing ships for global trade.
Yeah.
So it's been in our DNA. And even before the arrival of the Spanish, we had different tribes from different islands do their own trading, whether it was with the South Pacific Islands, whether it was the ASEAN countries, whether it was China, Japan, Korea.
Using the barangay vessels,
yes,
right?
The barangay. Yeah. So we have had that element in our DNA, and it's now just bringing it forward. And so if we realize that we actually play an important role in global trade, then you can build the sense of pride, because you want to be able to tell Filipinos, look, we're moving the world. And if you're not on a VLCC or a car carrier or a container ship, I mean, we're missing the boat. And so it's the way we describe the job that I think it can be very alluring. And at the same time, it is also very rewarding, but it is demanding.
Yeah.
So you want to say one side of the equation, but you also have to prepare them for the mindset that is necessary to be away for a period of time. But the benefit to that goes to themselves as an individual, goes to their family in terms of the income they can generate, and it goes to the country in terms of positioning the country as a resource base, an important resource base that has heart and soul.
So you think it is possible to be a good husband, a good father, a good contribute to your country as a seafarer?
Absolutely. Many sociologists have said that the Filipino diaspora breaks up the family. Yes, I mean, inevitably there is that, but it's actually happening even without having to go to another country, because people from provincial areas, one or two members or more members of the family, move and are attracted to the capital cities where there's more of an opportunity. But just think of the reverse. If there was no opportunity to go abroad, what would be the social pressures on that family? Because they couldn't provide, they couldn't grow, they couldn't expand. I think that would be worse. The fact that we have a diaspora, I think, is reflective of, yes, it reflects, say, the economic situation in the country, that we don't provide enough manufacturing jobs to absorb the labor force, the growing labor force. On the other hand, it has given us an opportunity to put our mark on the world. Seafaring, healthcare, and all of the other professions where Filipinos have excelled by being in these other resources. And the net result is seen in terms of the remittances coming back into the country, which has helped. And the biggest visibility to money coming in are, look at all the malls that are here. The SMs, the Robinsons, the Ayalas, all of the big malls. We may not have parks, but we have areas where people can come together and gather and celebrate. So that's there. But I say that is only part of the equation. That's only part of the story. The other story, the untold story, is the attributable economic value that Filipinos bring to the rest of the world. And that allows us to say, hey, the Philippines does mean something for the rest of the world. And that should build pride. But you don't start that story when they're older. You start it when they're younger. And this is where the whole pipeline effort comes into play. Many people are available. Many will be called, but few will be chosen. So we recognize that. But we keep molding those that we can, because those that want to be molded are going to be the ones that will bring this forward. They are the heart and soul of a ship.
We just spoke about the galleon trade, and we just spoke about SM malls, and we haven't actually mentioned the museum yet.
Yes. That is another project that Ambassador Salinas has really taken to heart. He was working with Senator Edgardo Angara, who had the original vision for this. The museum allows us to have a venue where we can teach history. We can talk of the past. As I mentioned, what we did in terms of building for others and crewing for others, which we're doing today. So you connect the past with the present. And then we need to talk about, where does this take us into the future? It's not just as a maritime nation, but we need to appreciate the fact that oceans need to be respected. Because oceans are the platform for current commerce, but they are also the source of food. They are the source of minerals. They are the source of energy. They are the source of enjoyment and tourism. We need to respect the waters, because based on how things are evolving, there are issues with climate, and climate will affect countries like ourselves. And it just so happens that our most vulnerable communities are where seafarers come from. And so we look at the museum as being a symbol of the past, a symbol of where we are today, and a potential trajectory of where we can go. But it's not just about the maritime trade, but it's also about understanding the oceans. And interestingly enough, we have a passage that comes into Manila. It's called the Verde Island Passage,
I know.
which is at the heart of marine biodiversity in this region. And it just so happened that the galleons of the past would go through the Verde Island Passage, and before getting to Manila Bay, would stop in the island of Mindoro in a place called Puerto Galera, Port of the Galleons. And so the historical context of that is that the galleons used to record water, tide, temperature, wind, and their logbooks are the source of benchmarking the studies today of where wind, current, and temperature is going, because back then there was no pollution. So if that was a benchmark, and understanding how long it took for one to go from one place to the other, and looking at it today and looking at the differences, so you can see how the galleon trade is a source of so much information. It is also a source of pride, because the Philippines was the hub of trading. We were it. We're no longer it now, but we are it for some other elements. So we can use these symbols as a way of attracting next generations. And we're very excited about the fact that we expect to see it open in April, and from then on, be a venue for people to celebrate past, present, and be prepared for opportunities in the future.
And we're hoping as well that we can get this event that I'm organizing at the museum, the Seafarer Social Summit, in partnership with PTC, where we're going to invite seafarers to come down and do a little bit of a tribute for them, as a gift for the seafarers.
Absolutely.
To really make them feel heard and valued.
So to your point, that's just another story of encouraging what is in our DNA to continue well into the future. You know, it's up to us to lose. It's up to us to continue. So it's what we make out of the different opportunities. And all of the issues and concerns that you raised, they're man-made issues. So man-made solutions. But we need to look at the totality of the picture and always try to find balance. It's not easy to find balance. And there will be discussions and debates and differing opinions, and that should be accepted. But it's finding that balance and realizing that at the end of the day, the ship must keep moving forward. So as long as we see that as our objective, as our mission, then we will be moving the world.
Yeah, I totally agree. I could speak to you forever, but I do want to ask one last question, because I know that we've spoke a lot about seafarers and what seafarers can do. But my last question to you is, what can owners do? If you were speaking to a room of owners today and they said, you know, it's 2026 now, sorry, what do I need to do today to optimize my crew for tomorrow? Because quite often, you know, when I speak to seafarers, it's all the owners care about is their P&L. That's it. How do owners optimize their crew and prepare for tomorrow?
Well, you say that owners care about their P&L. The P&L doesn't just happen. It happens because of a confluence of man and machine. The machine is there, but it needs to be maintained, and you need the man to maintain it. You need the man to operate it well, and you need people who can think. So we recognize that the path to a maritime career has a certain cadence, which includes the schooling, which includes the time at sea, which includes the continuous upward motion. So if you make the berths available, and if you operate according to a prescription that will help build the right individual, that is what you present.
But this takes investment. It takes investment, right?
The investment in that case is time. If you know, because the ship is already there. The ship will offer what it can offer.
Well, sometimes I've heard, apparently owners have said, I can't afford to put this cadet on my ship. I can't afford to do it. That's a bed that somebody else could have.
If fair, they can say that. And all they have to do is, if they don't have that cadet, and if they don't make the available career path, then they just have to deal with the market forces and whatever they'll have to pay for people in the future. So it's either you invest and spend for it now in a controlled environment, or it's what they call, you either have a fixed cost that you know what it's going to be, or you take your chances with whatever the cost will be in the future. I mean, and that's a decision that people will make. And so for so long as that happens, and most likely it will happen, there will always be this concept of a shortage. And that is because you can build a ship in 3 years or less, but historically it still takes about 10 years to develop the master, the chief engineer. So that is already a built-in challenge within this whole industry. That unless simulators can take the place of shortening that period, there will always be an imbalance. And yes, there will always be people who think of this side of the equation versus that side of the equation. Well, what else is new? This talk of shortage and finding skilled people, go back to the ages of sail. And it was there then, and it is there today, and it'll probably be there in the future. Maybe that's what makes the industry interesting. But beyond all of that, for a company like PTC, for a country like the Philippines, since we are the source, we need to continue to create the interest among the youth, because without that, we have nothing to offer. We need to create the resource. And we can create the resource because we know we have good working relationships with owners that care. And that is the starting point. And how it expands from there, yes, other countries will want to do that. And that's good. Competition is always good. But predictability, I think, will trump opportunities. So we have the predictability of a history in the Philippines. That's why I said earlier, it's for us to lose. But working with government, and with or without government, private sector knows what it needs to do. At least we think we know what we need to do. And we're out there engaging with the international community through ICS, through Intermanager, through BIMCO, Intertanko, by trying to keep an ear on what's happening, hopefully it gives us clues as to what we need to do here. But it's not an easy task. Some people say, well, this is just a recruiting effort. It's more than a recruiting effort because, as I mentioned, human capital development, inventory management, supply chain management, and then you have this whole idea of how do you deal with the human element and legal issues and liability issues.
Yeah.
So it's quite complicated. But the satisfying thing for me is the fact that what we have built over 47 years, I call a social infrastructure platform. Social because we've given an opportunity for a Filipino to earn what they would otherwise not be able to earn by being put in the global stage, to build careers and capabilities and skills that they would otherwise not have. And that for me is very, very fulfilling. And as a result of that, well, the rest of the country can benefit. And that's why I feel that as a result of everything that we do, and it's not over, there's many more things that we still need to do and learn, we're contributing to moving the world in more ways than one. And that for me is very satisfying. And the message to the owners is, let's work together because you've got the ships, you need the people, we have the people, we can provide it, but let's understand what are the nuances, the technicalities and challenges to getting people on board. You have a good owner, you'll always find good people.
Well said. Dito, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
I look
Bob.
forward to work with you on this project at the museum as well.
Look forward to that.
Thank you so much.